Hey, my name's Aidan, and yesterday we had the first day of week 1 of the Grid Winter Split. And now this pretty much saw the top 16 teams in Europe play against each other. They're split into 4 groups. I will give a little explanation of what the grid is. I did this in my last video as well, but if you haven't seen that and you don't really know what the grid means in terms of RLCS and in Rocket League or in the Rocket League esports scene, the grid is essentially an alternate route into RLCS. So, of course, you've got RLCS qualifiers, and then you've got qualifiers for the grid, and then you have the grid main events itself. And every week, the 16 teams compete against each other. For every win they get in a series, so every series win, they get granted points, and then they get given points based on their final finish each week. So whether they come first or 8th or 16th, they get a certain amount of points. And on top of that, every week, there's $15,000 up for grabs, with first place getting $7,500, second place getting $3,500, and third to fourth getting $2,000 each. So it's something extra to play for the teams. They're not only getting points towards their RLCS qualification, but they're also getting the chance to win prize money. So this new format means there's a lot more Rocket League going on. There's a lot more to keep up with, and I figured I make these videos to basically summarize what happens every week, because I know that not all of you will have time to watch all of the streams. And of course, as well, in the grid, every single team is sort of persuaded to stream their own runs. So every single team will be streaming their games with their own casters. Of course, I'm on the Wolves esports caster roster, and I follow the Wolves runs. So of course, I know a lot more about the Wolves games than I do about the rest. So moving on, week 1, the teams are split into 4 groups, so 4 teams per group. So in Group A, we had Guild Esports, Giants Gaming, Endpoint, and Wolves Esports. This is a very tough group, I think. You know, you've got Giants, Endpoint, and Guild, who all had high finishes last split. It's a very well contested group. Of course, we don't have BDS or Vitality in that group, which are of course the top 2 teams. But for Wolves coming through the open and closed qualifiers, this is a group that's going to be very tough for them to play in. And of course, for Guild, Giants, and Endpoint, it's also going to be a tough group. It's going to be hard for anyone to get solid results in this group. It should be fairly well contested, with Wolves maybe being the underdog in this group. We then have Group B, that's Redemption, Renault, Vitality, Galaxy Race, and Triple Trouble. So Redemption coming through the open and closed qualifiers with Wolves as well. And Redemption, of course, you know, having... It's a new team with a new roster, Cash, Mike Boy, and Ocelon. They look really good going through the closed qualifiers, and I expect that they will be looking to sort of make a statement here in Group B. Renault, Vitality, Galaxy Racer, well, we know how good they are. Galaxy Racer is always one of these teams that is challenging the top teams. Renault, Vitality is a top team. You know, they've been having top 2 finishes consistently for a few seasons. We then have Triple Trouble as well, which is maybe one of the teams with a bit lower expectations in Group B. Group C then sees Team Liquid, Oxygen Esports, Fadeaway, and Team Singularity. This is again quite a contested group. I think that any one of these teams would be looking to get results against the others. Team Liquid, of course, a slightly different roster for them. Fadeaway also a slightly different roster. Singularity now has Scrub Killer. So it's going to be a little bit interesting to see what happens in that group, because a lot of new stuff, a lot of sort of new players trying to go into the mix. And then Group D, we've got Team BDS, Top Blokes, Rich GG, and Dignitas. So Group D is a very, very dangerous group. You know, you've got Dignitas coming in on maybe not their greatest form. Of course, their golden era is somewhat behind them now, and you got Team BDS, which is, you know, a lot of people calling the best team in the world, but they're definitely the best team in EU, and always a team that no one really wants to be put in a group with, because it's almost like a guaranteed loss at this point. Top Blokes being maybe the second best in that group, and I would expect Rich GG and Dignitas to be fighting out for third place in that group. So round 1 actually started at 5 p.m. yesterday, and the first games were Giants versus Wolves Esports and Guild versus Endpoint. Now, Giants against Wolves, this was always going to be a tough challenge for Wolves. Giants getting a top 4 finish last split. We know the strength of their team. They dropped Tox, and in my opinion, this was a good move for Giants because they brought in Itachi. Itachi was killing it at FC Barcelona. Itachi, very, very talented player. He's young, 17 years old, and I think he really needed to just step up into, you know, a bigger team, and he's done that with Giants Gaming. He looks very impressive, and straight off the bat against Wolves, Itachi almost looked to be carrying Giants. And Giants then played a game in which I saw Zamway and State kind of play a supportive role in allowing Itachi like a lot of freedom on the field, and that worked out very well for them. Itachi was dangerous with the solo plays, got a lot of fakes out, could outplay 1 or 2 players at a time, and Giants Gaming, they were solid, very, very tough to break down, and I would say that Giants contest the midfield incredibly well against Wolves. Wolves play this all-out attack kind of style with a lot of quick passes, long passes as well, which kept getting cut out in the midfield. And Giants were just way better at holding possession, keeping possession, and Wolves had a really bad time against them. So Giants came through that series, winning the series 3-1. And then we had Guild versus Endpoint. Endpoint, of course, very well known for Virtuoso in his demo plays. Virtuoso, I guess, is like the talisman of Endpoint and sort of leads the charge. And of course his teammates as well, not shy of getting demos, you know, with Metsonoris relating wave. They play a very physical game. They play very, very, very quickly. But sometimes, you know, when you play at that speed, you also then open yourself up for some more mistakes. And given they sort of do these very, very deep rotations in sort of the opposing half, they sometimes leave the midfield a little bit open. So what we often see when Endpoint play is the ball going back and forth from one side to the other very, very quickly, because there's not a lot of congestion in the midfield. So Guild actually won that series 3-2. It was very, very close. All the games pretty much being within 1 goal. I think it was 2-1 for Endpoint in the first game. Then it was 3-2, 2-1, 2-1. Another 3-2, then a 3-2. So that could have gone either way. Endpoint, of course, going to feel a little bit robbed. I think their performance was fairly good. I think that Guild felt the pressure for sure. The Guild were looking good on this day. Noli, though, and Devo really showing up, coming from SC Barcelona, and I think this is a good move for Guild Esports as well, judging just by the way they seem to be motivated. Maybe it's like a honeymoon period, as a lot of teams can have that when new players come into the roster, but Devo was very solid at the back, and I'm sure that with his experience, he's able to sort of keep Though and Noli a little bit under wrap, or like to take care of them, because I know that in the past, Nolly and Though, especially when they had Scrub Killer on the roster, that there was a lot of sort of toxicity within the team itself and their sort of morale, and would get dragged down by each other. So I think having Devo there, along with Greg and their coach, they're maybe a bit more level-headed now. They look solid. They look like a way more mature team. Round one of Group B, that saw Renault Vitality play against Redemption. Now, this was a real shocker, because of course we expect that Renault Vitality are just going to win this. You know, Redemption coming in as a new roster, not a lot of expectations on them. Renault Vitality, one of the strongest teams in Europe, but Redemption actually took this one 3-2. Now, we've seen it in the past where Renault Vitality will drop a series and then they'll just go on and win everything else. And that's happened multiple times, but Redemption showing very, very strong. You know, winning game 1 4-1. They then dropped 2 games in a row 2-0. They couldn't get on the scoreboard, but they turned it around. They then won game 4 1-0 and then won game 5 3-2. And it's a very well fought series. And you've got to give it to Redemption, new team coming into the grid and beating Renault Vitality in their first game on day 1 of week 1. Very impressive. Their confidence is probably going to be looking good. It's really good for the morale, for the egos, and they're basically set up to have a great day ahead of them. Galaxy Racer played against Triple Trouble. They won that one 3-1, and I guess kind of in expected fashion. I kind of expected Triple Trouble to have a lot of trouble in Group B. I just don't think that they're quite on the level of the teams in their group. You know, of course, Redemption being a bit of an unknown, but Triple Trouble, the results haven't been fantastic recently. They've been kind of dropping in the rankings. Tadpole, Bluey, and Calyx, of course, and I think then Tadpole then later on mentioned on Twitter, you know, that they really need to get back to their winning ways, because it's not been going so well lately, and that despite having some good performances, just aren't getting the series wins. So they lost 3-1 to Galaxy Racer, so good start for Galaxy Racer as well. Group C, of course, then we had Oxygen against Fadeaway. Oxygen getting a nice, tidy 3-1 win. It looked quite convincing, especially Game 3, winning 4-0. The rest of the games were fairly close. Fadeaway with... they've obviously got a bit of a different roster with Yukio coming in, and quite a bit of expectation. You bring a player like Yukio in with the history that he's got, but he's kind of I get this feeling that he's a little bit plateaued at the moment, or has a bit of a skill ceiling he needs to break back through. So Oxygen winning that one, and well, we know that Oxygen, they're a very strong team, but quite inconsistent with Ferrer, Chasset, Astral. Of course, Astral being phenomenally mechanically gifted, and Ferrer and Chasset, well, they're also great players to have alongside him. So they won 3-1 in their first series of the day, and then Singularity beat Team Liquid. Singularity, of course, this is Scrubs' first time playing in the grid with Singularity. They came through the close qualifiers. They didn't have a great start to the close qualifiers. They got knocked down to the lower bracket, but then they had a monster run in the lower bracket. Of course, Singularity's Breezy, Hibbs, and Scrub Killer, and it's a dangerous looking team. But to be honest, coming into this, I kind of tend to think that, like, even though God Smiller really isn't kind of on that level, I think he fits better in the team than Scrub. But they did go on to win their first game against Team Liquid, which is not too much of a shocker, if I'm honest. Of course, that's Speed, Fruity, and Ronicky. Ronicky coming from FC Barcelona, with Cooks here moving out. So it's a decent roster, but I didn't expect that they would lose so hard to Singularity. Then Group D, we had a clean sweep, of course, BDS, clean sweeping Rix GG. There's no shock there. 1-0, 4-0, 5-1. Easy game for BDS. They're probably going to keep going on like this, through the rest of the grid. Top Blokes came up against Dignitas. Now, Dignitas, they really need to get some wins on the board, and I think losing their first series of the day against Top Blokes is going to hurt them. They have not found their form. Apparently, Jack has come in, and I don't know if he's really a good fit for Dignitas. Jorius is there, and you know what? He's a fantastic player individually, but he just doesn't seem to be settled in at Dignitas still. And Violent Panda, of course, the only player remaining from that sort of golden era where Dignitas actually won things, but Dignitas winning seems to be somewhat of a thing of the past. So they did lose their first series to Top Blokes. Moving on to round 2, in Group A, we had Giants against Endpoint. Giants got the clean sweep against Endpoint. Kind of unexpected, to be honest. I did think that Endpoint would get a game off them, but Giants were really in form this day. Itachi was popping off. He was having an absolute mad one. And so Giants won 4-1, 5-1, and 3-2. Game 3 being a little bit closer, but a little bit too late. Too little too late from Endpoint. And then Wolves came up against Guild. Now, I do think that in this group, if Wolves were to get a win, a series win, it would be against Guild. Guild play a very counter-attacking game, whereas Wolves tend to pile on the pressure. Now, in some way, Guild's playstyle is sort of a counter to the Wolves playstyle, because Wolves commit 3 people very deep into the field, which leaves a lot of space behind them, and if Guild can survive sort of an onslaught and then break out really quickly, they get the goals, and that is kind of what happened. That is the way that it played out. There was a lot of goals that just were long bangs and no one on the net, and sometimes even having just one person back, a little bump coming out, and Guild getting some easy goals. They won the series fairly convincingly. Of course, they dropped game 2 1-0. Wolves adopted a more physical play style, but I think Guild wised up to it and then went on to win 5-2 and 5-1 in game 3 and 4. So Guild now on 2 wins, 0 losses. Giants on 2 wins, 0 losses. So they've having a great day. Endpoint and Wolves having a bit of a hard time in Group A. Group B then, round 2. Renault Vitality beating Galaxy Racer 3-1, so they bounced back after losing to Redemption, kind of in expected fashion, because that's what we're used to seeing from Renault Vitality. Let's just drop a series, give them some false hope, and then we'll come back even stronger. And they had a great series against Galaxy Racer. Redemption then went on to win against Triple Trouble, and Triple Trouble giving Redemption a little bit more trouble than Renault Vitality did. A very, very close series. Again, Redemption winning 3-2. So Redemption, going for the full entertainment value, going to game 5, but they do get their second win of the day, which would then put them at the top of their group, the only team winning both their games so far. Group C in round 2 saw Oxygen actually beat Singularity. I would say that Oxygen should be the team winning this one. Singularity still getting used to playing together. Oxygen slightly stronger though. It was 3-2, but the game 5 was not very close. Neither was game 3, but they did have 2 games go to overtime, so could maybe have gone either way if those overtime swung in the favor of Singularity, but Singularity just missing out on the win there, so they can't keep their win streak going. Oxygen, however, then go up to the top of the group of Group C. And Team Liquid beating Fadeaway. So Team Liquid, they're bouncing back after their loss to Singularity. Fadeaway not really having a good day so far, dropping both their series in Group C in round 1 and round 2. Group D, undoubtedly BDS beating Dignitas 3-1. So Dignitas did manage to get a game off them, unlike Rix GG. But Rix GG seemingly also not really quite up to the challenge at this point, not having a good start to the day. Top Blokes clean sweeping them 3-0. And Top Blokes just showing their quality at this point as well, that they are also one of these teams that should be looking to break into sort of like the top 8, top 4 even, if they're on a good day. Moving on then, we've got round 3, the last round of the day. So round 3, Group A, that was 3-2 in a game between Guild and Giants. Now, this was a big surprise for me. I thought that Guild, they were one of the teams which I thought did not look great. They play a little bit forced, a little bit rushed, but then they really stepped up against Giants, because Giants were solid during round 1 and round 2. They looked very hard to break down. They were getting a lot of shots on as well, contesting the midfield incredibly well. But I think the speed that maybe Guild play at and the quick counters perhaps just got to Giants. So Guild winning 3-2 and eventually going 3-0 in the group, which I did not expect. And it does seem that Guild may be now a slightly different team without Scrub on the roster. Devo clearly a good pickup for Guild, at least so far in the results that they're getting. And then Wolves Esports, you'd think that given Endpoint and Wolves both on 0-2, this would be a close series, but it was anything but. And going into this, I said we're going to get 6 goals a game in this one. It's just going to be absolute madness. And we did absolutely get a lot of goals. Game 1, there was 9 goals. I think it ended 5-4 for Endpoint. That was very, very close. Game 2, again, really close. Just missing out on my prediction of 6 goals a game with a 3-2 for Endpoint. And then Game 3 was 5-3 for Endpoint. And Wolves just did not seem to have the pace. I think they got baited into playing Endpoint's game. Endpoint were playing incredibly quick. This game was going from one side to the other. I mean, it was like watching tennis. It was insanely fast and very forced. So it wasn't composed Rocket League by any means. And I think that Endpoint kind of rely on that chaos and havoc to pull the opposition team out of position. And that's kind of seemed to be what happened more often than not. But it was Wolves that were also getting involved in the physical plays. They were looking for the demos. I saw Virtuoso get a taste of his own medicine on many occasions, but Wolves really weren't up to the plate on their first day in the grid, and they ended up with the worst record of day 1 of week 1. They only won 2 games all day, losing 9, so that put them on a match difference of -7, and the next closest behind them was -4. So really not a good start for them, not looking good. But of course, that's if you guys aren't aware, this is the group stage, and everyone from the group stage actually goes into the playoffs. It will just affect your seeding. So of course, with Wolves, the lowest seed, they will be going up against the best seed, and that brings me on to Group B. Redemption knocking it out of the park, beating Galaxy Racer 3-2. So they won all their series 3-2, and they will be the team that Wolves will be facing in the playoff round. But Redemption I think that they've done fantastic. They completely surprised me. Coming into this, I thought that they would be on a similar level with Wolves in terms of the results that they'd get, but they're popping off and they're looking extremely dangerous. They beat Vitality. They then went on to beat Triple Trouble, and then they went on to beat Galaxy Racer. And given these were all went to game 5, it does show some mental strength in that team as well, and that ability to keep pushing. They play with confidence. There was 2 overtimes in the series with Galaxy Racer, very close series. They did win game 2 5-0, but they lost game 1 2-0, so it was a real back and forth at that point. And then the overtimes, they're always tough, but Redemption winning both of those overtimes in game 3 and game 5. So they're really starting to show they're a strong team and should not be doubted. And Red Vitality then got their second win of the day against Triple Trouble, which actually put then Triple Trouble on a 0-3. Kind of expected, didn't think they would have too easy of a time in Group B. I did think they would be sort of the lower performing team in that group, but did not expect Redemption to be at the top at the end of day 1. Group C for round 3, we saw Team Liquid beat Oxygen, so they actually go top of the group. with that 3-2 win over Oxygen. Kind of surprised to see Team Liquid do so well, but this was a group that was always going to be very close, very well contested, and you can kind of see that because the results, the top teams are 2-1 and the bottom teams are both 1 and 2, and the game differences are no more than a +2, a +1, or a -1, -2. So very, very close group, and that makes for an exciting competitive group, and all these games were exciting. Again, another Game 5, Team Liquid beating Oxygen 3-2. Fadeaway then beat Singularity 3-0. So now Singularity got off to a really good start against Team Liquid, but Team Liquid managed to turn their day around, whereas Singularity actually sort of dipped afterwards. So they lost 3-0 to Fadeaway, who were not having a good day. So interesting to see that. Not sure what really happened to Singularity. Don't want to start calling that there was some tilt, but there were 2 long overtimes in that game. So those games were close, and I think that it kind of rattled Singularity because they lost Game 1 after a 3.5-minute overtime. They lost that one 2-1. Game 2, same story, 1-1 after regular time, then into a 2.5-minute overtime in which Fadeaway then won 2-1. Game 3 was just 3-0 for Fadeaway, and I think there was a little bit of tilt at Singularity. I think there was maybe definitely feeling rattled. I mean, you lose 2 overtimes after close games. It does not do your confidence any favors. So Fadeaway will finish above Singularity in that group, with Team Liquid taking the top spot, followed by Oxygen, Fadeaway, Singularity. The final round in Group D saw BDS beat Top Blokes 3-1 and Rix GG beating Dignitas 3-2. So very good for Rix GG, because I was expecting them to go 0-3 in this group. Didn't think they had it in them to beat Dignitas, especially after they lost 3-0 and 3-0 to BDS and Top Blokes respectively. But Polar, Dead Monster, and Magnus really sort of turned it around, and I think that Magnus, he was very, very happy just to be back in the grid, but let alone then to go and beat Dignitas in Game 5 with a 1-0 win, and there were another 2 overtimes in that series as well. Game 2, a 4-minute overtime in which Rix GG won 3-2, and then they won the next overtime in Game 5. That was a 0-0 game in regular time, so only 1 goal for that game, coming in almost 3 minutes of overtime. Rix GG really just showing some strength to push forward in those overtimes. Dignitas, again, this is worrying for them. Really just a team in decline, and it's quite sad. In some ways it's quite sad to see, because they've always been such a big name, not just in Rocket League esports, but in all esports. Dignitas is a huge org, and they're really struggling, but it's also good to see these smaller teams like Rix GG able to get results. So Dignitas definitely still got a lot of work to do. They were, going into the playoffs. We'll take a quick look at the bracket. The first game being Guild Esports against Dignitas. Dignitas going to struggle here. Guild Esports looking very strong, doing very, very well, and Devo is going to be looking to continue these results, continue the performances he was having in day 1, then into day 2. I see Guild Esports winning this one, and there is no lower bracket in the playoffs in the grid, so you lose your first series, you're out. And the next game will be Renault Vitality versus Fadeaway. Now, this is an interesting one. Fadeaway not having the best start to their day 1, but they look very strong against Singularity. And Renault Vitality, maybe a bit of dip of form. They lost to Redemption. They dropped a game to Galaxy Racer. They dropped 2 games to Triple Trouble. Triple Trouble being the bottom of their group. And this could be worrying for Renault Vitality. Fadeaway definitely a team which could get a result here. And I think that Fadeaway should be putting Renault Vitality under pressure. They should be playing with confidence in this one, because it's looking good for them. Then we've got Team Liquid versus Triple Trouble. So I see Team Liquid winning this one. Triple Trouble not looking so strong. Team Liquid having some very good results against strong teams, getting through to the top place of Group C, which was a very competitive group. And I'm going to expect to see Team Liquid get a win here. You then got Top Blokes versus Endpoint. This should be a close one. Now, Endpoint not having the best day, losing 3-0 to Giants, then, losing 3-2 to Guild, but I think they had the toughest group. And Endpoint are by no means a bad team. No, they've had some very good finishes in competitions and tournaments recently in a full split as well. They are dangerous, and when they're playing well, it's a team you got to look out for. A very hard one to call. Top Blokes having some ups and downs as well on day one. They dropped 2 games to Dignitas. Dignitas, of course, being the weakest team in their group on day one, but they did beat RLCSX 3-0, and they did get a game from BDS, which would, of course, then suggest that they've got something in the tank, as it was the one of only 2 games that BDS dropped on that day. It should be a close game. Top Blokes with Endpoint, definitely one to watch. We're continuing. We've got Team BDS versus Team Singularity. I would love it to see Team Singularity do well here. I'm really not a fan of Scrub Killer. I'm going to admit that. So I don't like seeing him win. But I would love to see someone knock BDS off their pedestal. But I really don't think that BDS are going to drop this one. And I can even see it being a 3-0 for BDS. They are just so strong at the moment. Then we've got Giants Gaming versus Galaxy Racer. This could be another very interesting one. Similar to Top Blokes Endpoint, both these teams able to compete at the highest level. They're both in good, decent form. I wouldn't say they're in their best form. Giants Game maybe being a bit better form than Galaxy Racer. But I can imagine Itachi is full of confidence at the moment. Young player, playing very, very well. Just made a move to a big team, replacing a big player in the form of Tox. Giants Game, I would put them to win this one, but I do think it's going to be a very, very close series again, and I wouldn't be surprised if Galaxy Racer can just about upset Giants in this one. We then got Redemption against Wolves. Now, on any other day, I would say this is going to be very close. Redemption, of course, they've got Mike Boy. Wolves Esports got Rix Ronde. Rix was the captain of Mike Boy back at Libertas. This is a bit of a grudge match. It should be really, really entertaining, fun to watch. But the form that Redemption are in, I wouldn't have said this on another day. I would say it would be super close. But I think Redemption are looking good to win this one. Wolves, they hopefully, will be able to had some time to look at, their performance yesterday and reevaluate, look at the replays, because they did not have a good day. They need to improve it if they want to beat Redemption here. But Redemption probably the favorite in this bracket. And then Oxygen Esports versus Rix GG. So it should be comfortable for Oxygen. But Rix GG, of course, getting that win against Dignitas, proving that they are able to show up when they're needed to. Should be another close game, but I would put this in favor of Oxygen. But if you're wondering which series you'd like to watch, I would say Top Blokes versus Endpoint. That will likely be a banger. Redemption Wolves could be a good game, but I think Giants Game versus Galaxy Racer may be more exciting, and Oxygen Esports versus Rix could also be another one to watch. But for me, that Top Blokes Endpoint game, I think it's going to pop off. So, alright, so if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of this kind of content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. Drop a like, drop a comment, get involved in the conversation. Would love to hear how you think the teams are going to do in the grid, going forward into weeks 2, 3, and 4, and what you think of, the performances of these teams as well. But for now, guys, peace.